Hello, and welcome to the 2023 main stage at the Game Developers Conference here in San Francisco, California. Woo! I am your host, Liz Ryerson, and I hope you've been enjoying your week thus far. I hope we've all become masters of waiting in line. We've all become masters of navigating torrential rainstorms, so I think we're good. We're ready for this. So now it's time to settle in, because we're here to talk about the future of games and play. So I have a serious thing to talk about for 1 second before we begin. So I am a trans woman. I identify as trans woman. She, her are my pronouns. And there are a lot of trans people who I know who work in the games industry in various capacities. Some who are here, some who are, many who are elsewhere. And there's a lot of stuff going on in this country in terms of major newspapers, politicians, et cetera, that are trying to make life as a trans person hard. So to get everyone here who I know who comes to this event, is involved with the game industry, I'd like to ask, I'm gonna count down. I'm gonna say 3, 2, 1, and if you all can say trans rights with me, then we'll do that. I'll do it twice. Does that sound good? That sound good? Okay. All right, let's get ready. 3, 2, 1, trans rights. All right, let's try to get it louder this time. Let's try to really hit it this time. Okay, 3, 2, 1, trans rights. Nice, okay, I think we're ready now. All right, so throughout its history, many out there have made big promises about the future of games and play. There's never any shortage of talk about new directions, new technologies, new markets, which many will often say are poised to transform the industry forever. But as I'm sure many of you know, many of these big promises don't end up coming to pass. And so it can be hard to separate the hype and the speculation from the reality which affects the day-to-day livelihood of most people who work in the game industry. And that's why today we're here to talk about some practical, developer-driven efforts to expand the industry, to incorporate new perspectives, and also to get ready for the challenges we'll all be collectively facing in the future. Okay, so work by fans and hobbyists have had a massive impact on the culture and history of video games. From Doomwads, which, by the way, sidebar, shout out to the website doomworld.com. By the way, I'm a big Doom fan, and it's a good website. To Gary's Mod, to Minecraft, and beyond. So our first speaker is the co-founder of Control-Z, and he runs a user-generated content, or UGC, platform called .Big Bang. And he's here to talk about how to run a successful UGC platform that benefits both players and developers. So let's please welcome to the stage Robert Anderberg.
Thanks, Liz. My name's Robert Anderberg, and for the last 10 years, I've been building a platform that lets people play and make games together. The playing part allows people to jump straight in, and then people can build together in the multiplayer game editor. Initially, it was just a hobby project, but then we've grown to a studio of over 25 people. Today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the technology behind our platform, some challenges that we had building it, and the solutions that we found to overcome those challenges. But first of all, I'd like to talk a little bit about the history of this phrase, user-generated content. In the recent years, UGC for games has been in the news frequently, especially when people are talking about metaverse. And that can lead us to believe that it's a new thing. But in fact, user-generated content has been part of computing since computers were very first in our homes. Many 8-bit computers shipped with the basic programming language. This meant that everybody could be a creator without needing to build or install anything. The decision to include the basic programming language in these computers set thousands of kids off on a journey of discovery and wonder, with many of them becoming game developers, myself included. The first game that I made was a version of Atari's Breakout, written in BBC Basic on the BBC microcomputer, with a whopping 32K of RAM. In the 90s, Tim Sweeney's ZZT and id Software's Doom shipped tools that allowed their players to modify the game and distribute those modifications. By giving users the ability to build on top of an already successful game, they solved the blank canvas problem and kicked off the PC modding scene, which is still going strong over 30 years later. In the 2000s, Linden Lab made Second Life. Arguably the first metaverse, they included all the tools people needed to create art, game logic, and worlds right in their client. And as long as you had the client installed, you could bring somebody to you with just a link. Many of the things people are most excited about today about metaverse, such as digital land sales, user-to-user marketplaces, and cash out, were present in Second Life over 20 years ago. Today, platforms like Minecraft and Roblox are giving a new generation of game developers their chance to build games and give them to players. But what will the future of user-generated content look like? Well, to answer that question, I think we can look to a platform like YouTube and what it did for video creators. YouTube gave video creators a way to start simple with a very low barrier to entry, to earn a modest income, to grow from there, to grow a big viewership, then to go full-time with equitable pay. I believe that something similar will happen for game developers. But enough about the history. Let's talk about the technology behind our platform. So when we think about technology, we think about two broad categories: tech for creators and tech for players. For creators, we want to provide tools that allow them to build everything they need for a game in one place, just like Second Life did. We also want them to be able to remix and kit bash together things from other players so to solve the blank canvas problem. For players, we want to get them in a game incredibly quickly, in a few seconds. We also want to run on as many devices as possible, and ideally, new devices as they come out. I'll talk about two things that we did for creators and one for players. When building art tools for creators, in traditional games, you use a 3D modeling package to create a triangle mesh. And to do that, artists require a lot of skills in terms of building the mesh, topology, UV mapping, materials. But because we wanted to target a very broad range of creators, triangle meshes were not a great choice, especially when you think about remixing and recombining things. If you take a triangle mesh and chop it in half, for example, there's nothing inside of it. And that is actually unintuitive for new creators. They would expect it to be full of something like it is in the real world. So we decided not to use triangle meshes. We could have used 2D sprites. They're very easy to understand, easy to animate, and easy to remix. But we find that users want to build the kind of games that they play themselves, so 3D games. So what if we took these picture cells and turned them into volume cells? I think you've guessed where I'm going. We're going to use voxels. So we decided to pick voxels as the first primary asset type for what we're building. And as you can see here, our community have remixed and recombined people's assets in multiple different ways. Everything here is a remix of the orange guy in the bottom right. If we add scale to the equation, we can give beginners the ability to work at a lower resolution, like you can see on the right, an intermediate resolution, all the way up to really highly detailed models on the left. Scale also gives us something else that's really interesting. As you can see here, we've got some beautiful green trees, But if we zoom out, you can see that they're actually four-leaf clovers. Giving people the ability to scale objects up and down actually provides many opportunities to reuse things and get started quickly. We did find one problem with voxel models, though, and that is that our users found it very difficult to fill large spaces and create landscapes purely from those models. So we did some experimentation, and we discovered that a different volumetric modeling technique that uses signed distance fields gave us the other part of this equation. As you can see here, I've got a really nice desk ornament bouncing up and down on my desk. This is modeled using signed distance fields. And if we run out through these doors, the landscape here is the same model. I'll just show you that again, because I think it's cool. We did have one concern, which was that perhaps the voxel models and the signed distance field models wouldn't look nice together, wouldn't work well visually. But once we applied a flat shaded material to the landscapes, I think it works out pretty well. OK, now let's talk about code. Let's see if I can drive onto this correctly. When thinking about code for a traditional game, most game logic is defined in a single project, and it's not common to have two classes with the name player or NPC or camera. But we want to allow users to recombine and remix code from lots of different places into one game. And so we want to solve this problem where many users will use those names and they will clash. One solution to this is to isolate each script in its own namespace. And while that solves the problem, it means that it makes it difficult for those scripts and game objects to communicate between each other. To solve this problem, we looked back over 50 years to the Smalltalk programming language, which was created by Alan Kay and his team. Smalltalk is a purely object-oriented programming language where objects communicate through message passing. One object can send a message to another, and if the receiving object implements that message, they can implement and execute the code for the message to run. We added something additional, because many platforms in the past have had message passing, and the addition was to allow users to broadcast to a tag. By doing that, we gave users a way to create their own custom message buses and also hook into events and messages that were defined in other games that they were remixing. As a quick example, the rocket here is the only thing currently in this scene that has a tag, which is called launchable. When I jump on this button, the rocket fires off and explodes. If I jump on the green button, then the tag is added to Alan Kay and his beautiful hot air balloon. And when I jump on the button, he flies away into the sunset. Well done, Alan Kay. OK, the next thing I'm going to talk about is for players. Let's see if we can catch Alan on the way past. Let's see if he's going to go through the slide. Yeah, there he is. Good job, Al. OK, so for players, the main thing we think about is distribution. Having users generate games is one thing. Makes a lot of sense. It's good fun. But if people can't play the games that you're creating, then there's really not much point to doing it. And we find that creators on our platform are super motivated to actually share their games, get people in, get them playing. In a traditional game development pipeline, you make a build of your game, you upload it to a store, and then you try and encourage somebody to find it and download it. Hopefully, there's a build for the platform that they have, et cetera, et cetera. But for a user-generated content platform, that doesn't really work. We've all struggled to get our friends to install new games, install new platforms, and there's a lot of friction there. So ideally, what we would want is a runtime that was really small, that maybe even if we could dream it up, magically already was installed on everybody's devices, installed on new devices as they came out, that could stream user-generated content assets and code, and could start those games up super quickly. You might have guessed what I'm talking about now, but yes, it's a web browser. So I know what you're thinking. Web browsers are terrible, and JavaScript is a language for noobs. And while there are definitely challenges in building games for a web browser, our team's background is in PC and console development. And at least every console that I've developed for has its own strengths and weaknesses, has its own foibles, things that you need to work around. And by taking the approach of treating a web browser as a game console, working to its strengths and avoiding its weaknesses, we really have been able to achieve something that I think is pretty good. Anyway, rather than talking about all of this stuff, I think it would be good to put all of the things we've covered into practice. So now I'm going to put a QR code on the screen. And as you might have also guessed, my slide deck today is actually a live game. And you can jump into this game. And the only way you're going to get out of this talk and get me out of the stage is if we make it to the end here. So we can see a few people joining in here. I'm going to go and reveal that this is actually a game by enabling the UI. Oh, man, it's getting a bit busy. OK, but there is one slight problem, which is that there's a gap here. How are we going to fill the gap? That's right, we're going to edit the game. I'm sure that doing a live demo in a GDC keynote is the best idea, and it will not go wrong. So everybody, send me your good demo vibes, please. OK, let's do it. OK, so the first thing I'm going to do is add a little bit more danger to this scenario, because I think it's a bit too easy so far. I'm going to bring this lava across, and using the message passing system that we talked about earlier, when people touch the lava, it sends a message to their character, decrementing their health, and unfortunately killing them in the process. So that is a sad time. Next, what I'm going to do is grab a voxel object, place it over here, scale it up. Let me just make that slightly bigger. OK, this person has managed to find their way to the end without me doing this. I'm going to build a path for you across to the last slide. And hopefully now, oh, somebody died again. Sad times. Let's see if anybody can get across. I'm going to remove my QR code, go back here, get rid of my UI, and I'm going to meet you at the final slide. And here we are, at the end. OK, well, all that's left for me to do today is to say thank you very much for watching my presentation. I will be hanging around GDC if you're interested in talking to me about any of this stuff. But otherwise, thanks very much, and I hope you have a great GDC.
Thank you, Robert. That was a fascinating presentation, and I'm interested to see where it all leads in the future. So even as many workplaces in the world are now increasingly requiring their employees to return to in-person work, many in the game industry continue to work remotely. Some find that remote work is much better for their own health, and both physical and mental, and it helps them continue to operate effectively at their jobs. So here to talk about how to build workplace cultures around remote work which support the mental health and well-being of an entire team, I'm very pleased to introduce co-founder and CEO, head chef of Magic Soup Games, Jen O'Neill.
All right, it's been 3 years since we started working from home, and we are great at it, right? I mean, we're total pros. We figured this out as an industry. Well, not so fast. Actually, there are challenges, and employee well-being is the main issue. Mental health is on the decline. We saw a 17% increase in cases of anxiety and depression during the pandemic. We're sad, we're lonely, and we're more disconnected than ever. Engagement is falling, and worse, active disengagement is on the rise, which means people are quitting. They're opting out in a variety of ways. I think you've heard the term quiet quitting, right? Quiet quitting is when people do the bare minimum to get by. It used to be called phoning it in, but since we're literally phoning it in and zooming it in, we needed a new word. Quiet quitting quiet quitters, they're not necessarily lazy people. It's just maybe they don't have the motivation, or maybe there's not clear goals, or they're feeling demoralized. Sometimes a job just doesn't provide the purpose that it needs to. Have you ever heard of ghost quitting? Ghost quitting is like ghosting a relationship, except it's your job. Please don't do this. When you do that, we worry about you. Don't make us call your parents, okay? And then there's loud quitting. Have you ever heard of loud quitting? No? Loud quitting is when you send your resignation in, and then somehow the press gets a hold of it. I wouldn't recommend it. I think I might have invented that. Anyway, there's something we need to do about all of this quitting. So why is this so hard? Well, because there are things that we really miss about working together. It's difficult to ad hoc problem solve without being in the same space. When you're sitting right next to someone, you can peer over their shoulder and easily see what you need to discuss. It's a lot more natural and less scheduled. The water cooler and the weak ties aren't there. Have you ever had a really rough meeting with somebody? You're, just having a rough discussion, and at the end of it, you feel like maybe your relationship is on the rocks, and then you run into each other in the kitchen, and you have some random conversation about the latest show you've been binge watching, or bacon, something random. Well, this is not just idle chit-chat. This is a signal that says we're cool. And you don't schedule a bacon conversation. That would be really strange. You're not like on Slack going, hey, can we huddle for 7 minutes here and talk about The Last of Us or something? It's not something that actually happens. It's hard to set those boundaries between work and personal life. Sometimes you feel like you're just on this never-ending treadmill, and it just goes on and on. Remember when the pandemic first started, we said every day was Blur's Day. We need those boundaries to help us establish a rhythm. Isolation and loneliness also weighs on our mental health and motivation. There are days when you feel like you've been talking to yourself all day, just spinning around in your chair, just hoping to have a good conversation. And what makes it worse is that days can go by and no one can see your silent suffering. I might, at work, actually pass by a person and see their sad little face and at least say, hey, are you all right? But there are benefits that make it well worth the trouble to try to solve these challenges. Of course, the number one benefit is getting all of that commute time back. I mean, it's really nice to have those hours of your life back, especially if you live in LA or one of those big metropolitans. Second is that working from home has really opened up what the meaning of flexibility is. Women disproportionately are the main caregivers of their children, and being able to work from home could mean the difference in even working at all. Also, introverts love this. No one is popping by their desk, coffee in hand, asking for a TPS report, interrupting their flow. Everyone gets more focused time to work with less distractions. And Zoom is a great equalizer. My Brady Bunch box is just as big on the screen as yours. There's no executive row, and good leaders should and are able to be more available. If you miss brainstorming on a whiteboard, there is research that shows there are benefits to remote work brainwriting. This is where people have time to add their own thoughts before the group comes back together. Everyone gets a chance to participate equally. It doesn't matter how senior you are or how extroverted you are. Everyone gets to participate. And if you are working remotely, that doesn't limit you to your house. You could take a road trip with your laptop. It opens up all kinds of geographical boundaries. For me, as somebody who's starting a company, I love that because that means big talent diversification. And it allows people to live closer to aging parents and in more affordable locations. So what do? At Magic Soup, we believe great culture is co-created, just like great games. Leaders, of course, have an important role, but we are all chefs in our kitchen, building our company together. When it comes to culture, we don't think of it as a bear that you have to wrestle that's going to end up eating your strategy for lunch. We think of it as an important partner. Culture is a strategic asset, and being intentional with it will not only result in greater success and happier people, but it'll also allow you to build what you want to build. So I'll give you a few tips. You want to create virtual paths for connection. In order to work better together, you have to build a relationship that's based on more than just the day-to-day tactics of work. As I mentioned earlier, when you are fully remote, the weak ties aren't there. There aren't natural ways to connect. And so you have to invent ways to have this informal conversation. So first, you want to create virtual water coolers. We have a plugin on Slack called Donut. It asks random questions to start a water cooler conversation, like, how do you like your eggs? Or what was your first job? We have a channel called the Wake Up Songs channel, where anyone can post a song they like and want the team to know about. So my team has had their fill of my 90s house music. Think about employee-led experiences. Everyone on the team can volunteer ideas for virtual get-togethers. At my last studio, we had a lunch and learn series that wasn't just dedicated to work. One session was about the art of whiskey tasting. Another was on corn snakes. True story. Make time for small talk. Allow time for casual chit-chat at the start of meetings. Research shows that small talk leads to more productive meetings. The ice is broken, and people can move through the meeting with ease. And if small talk is not your thing, well, I created a list of corning questions for my team. I bet you could too. It includes things like, what is my go-to karaoke song? It's Umbrella by Rihanna, in case you're wondering. These are great ways to get to know one another, but you'll need to be even more rigorous about those formal communications. So I think most teams are really good with one-on-ones and stand-ups, but those generally tend to be status updates. How good are you at really digging in and trying to identify the problems and barriers to communication that might be affecting the morale of the team? It takes a brave person to stand up and talk about how that could be happening. Make that easier by making it a part of the process, and add a regular relationship check-in to your list of rituals. Now, with all of these virtual ways of connecting, not everyone might be present, so some important stuff might get missed. So it's really important to get into the habit of documenting and sharing broadly. You want to immortalize it in a single source of truth, like Confluence, Wiki, GitLab, whatever it is that you use. Working remotely means a greater amount of flexibility and an integration of work and life. But these are all new muscles for us. There can be a lost sense of leaving work or turning it off. That's not healthy for you. It's not healthy for your mental health or your physical health. And honestly, it's really not that productive. So now I'm going to say a few things that maybe your mom would tell you. And by the way, she's right. First, you want to define a schedule and commit to your off times. That means saying no and resisting the urge to respond to emails that may be coming in at 10 o'clock at night. Ask yourself, is it really urgent? Just because other people do it doesn't mean you have to. Take some breaks away from the screens. Go for a walk, play with your dog. Taking a break can be a nice mental reset. And get good sleep. I don't have data, but what I know about us gamers is that we have pretty terrible sleep hygiene, myself included. So when you don't get enough sleep, your brain doesn't function, and it's not at its best. Your patience is low, and you're a little cranky, right? And if you want that high emotional intelligence, then you need to have that sleep. So speaking of emotional intelligence, it is an absolute necessity. And if you were good at it in an in-person world, you're going to have to amplify it significantly when you're going remote. Now, this talk is much too short to give a crash course on EQ, but there's a ton of great books on building your emotional intelligence and being a better leader and a team member as a result. So for now, I'll give a few pointers. Be kind and compassionate. Kindness is a learnable habit. You can build compassion muscle through basic practices. Listen actively with undivided attention. Ask people how they're doing. Let them know you are here for them. Say thank you. It's free and it can mean a lot. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Brené Brown has an excellent TED Talk on the power of vulnerability. It's required watching for anyone in our company. This doesn't mean you have to tell your deepest and darkest secrets. It does mean not being afraid to admit your ignorance, admitting when you've made a mistake, asking for forgiveness. This is especially important as a leader. If you act like you're the smartest person in the room, well, you're not going to get the benefit of all the great talent around you. Don't let things fester. Have the courage to reveal what's bothering you, and have the courage to ask others what's bothering them, even if you know that you're probably the source of their frustrations. And when you know you're about to have one of those difficult conversations, make it safe. You want to open the door for it. Tell people that it's a safe and judgment-free space. Commend people for their bravery. If you do all of these things, you'll build trust, and people will open up to you. This is a competitive and hard-charging business. You know this. And we don't say it enough. It's okay not to be okay. Normalizing conversations around mental health is the best way to minimize the stigma and create the space for support. When people are more open about their mental health journey, it can help create a more inclusive and supportive environment. Now, I know at times this can feel really awkward, but if you see somebody and you see that they're a bit off, take the time and ask them how they're doing. Sometimes your instinct is wrong, and maybe they really just didn't get enough sleep. But sometimes they have real problems, and they need a friend to lean on. When someone is vulnerable with you, it's incredibly brave, and you have a responsibility to not judge. They've given you a gift, and you must treat that with care. Now realize, even if you are educated about mental health, you're not a professional. Be supportive, but know your limits, and be a conduit for a person to seek professional help. We have a workaholic and aggressive culture in this industry, and some people succeed despite their unhealthy behaviors, not because of them. Realize that this is not the only path to success, and surround yourself with people who have the best interest in your mental health. Isolation is definitely something I experience working from home, and it can be draining. What I recommend is to be proactive in forming those connections inside and outside of work. Did you know that if you have a good friend at work, you'll be happier and more engaged? It's true. There's actual research on this. Like, you will want to stick around at your place of work if you have a good friend that you can get support from. If some of you are local, you might want to meet for lunch from time to time. Go bowling or have a board game night. Me and my team, we have a weekly game night together. It's awesome. And some of us chefs, we like to cook together. You might consider forming huddles. Meet up with people outside of your organization even. There was a time when I would meet over Zoom with a group of women leaders in the industry, and that friendship and that support was incredibly valuable and healthy to me. You could form your own huddle built around your own interests. GDC is a fantastic place to network. Consider really following up with the people that you meet here and find ways to continue to connect. And if you're underrepresented in this industry, it can be awfully lonely. It can be lonely to be the only woman or trans person or Black person in the room. If you belong to a bigger company, consider joining an employee resource group. That's a great support system for you. And if you're at a smaller company that maybe doesn't have those kinds of resources, connect with the many organizations that have been created exactly for the purpose of supporting you. Many of them are listed here. They partner with GDC already, and I bet there's a number of networking events happening here. And lastly, consider volunteering. Volunteer work can be some of the most rewarding, heart-led investments of your time. It's a great way to feel connected to a community of like-minded people with a shared passion and purpose. I really enjoy the time that I spend working with Women in Gaming International. WIGI provides high-quality mentorship and leadership training experiences for women coming up in the business. For myself, I find it equally rewarding to participate as a mentor. I get to work with women who are motivated to learn, to advance their careers, and I get to expand my network, both with the mentees and the mentors. So some final thoughts here. A fully remote environment is not for everyone. Maybe your team works better in person. Maybe in person is better at different phases of production. I've seen teams meet in the office during periods of creative collaboration, only returning back to the office or back home fully remote when it's time to implement and be heads down. But at Magic Soup, we've decided that the benefits are worth solving the challenges. So if you want to make it work, remember, find better ways to connect virtually, set some boundaries and take some time for self-care, raise the bar on emotional intelligence, be okay about talking about mental health, combat isolation for yourself and your teams, and guess what? Even if you do decide to go back into the office, all of this is going to make you even stronger. Thank you for your time today. Thanks. I don't know if we did that.
Thank you, Jen. That was very enlightening. I hope we can continue to openly discuss how we can prioritize the mental health and well-being of people working in this industry. So our final talk today is about an issue that is very, very often talked about in industry circles and larger society, but we're a very long way from reaching a fair and equitable reality on. There are numerous barriers that people of color face when it comes to seeing an industry which represents them, both in terms of who gets to work on the games we make and also what kind of games get made. So here to talk about how to capture underrepresented cultural experiences in a way that nonetheless is still appealing broadly to larger audiences, I'd like to welcome to the stage Creative Director of Outer Loop Games, Chandana Ekanayaka.
How's everybody doing? Awesome, awesome. I got to tell my mom who showed up, because she's going to ask later. So I've been in the game industry for about 25 years. This will be 26 years. One of the most common questions I get asked, whether it's at GDC or at DICE or in a cab coming to go to the airport, is, where are you from? And it's it's a fine question. It's like breaking the ice and wanting to get to know somebody, but usually my reaction to this is usually this. And I'm like, I understand what you're really asking. It's like when someone in a dominant culture is asking that for someone that they think is an outsider or someone that's from somewhere else, this is what they mean. I mean, it's not intentional, and people are just trying to ask, but like strangers asking that of other strangers, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, because I'm never going to see you. I'm buying toothpaste, man. I don't, we're not going to have a conversation on where I grew up. It doesn't really matter, right? So if you get to know me, you'll find out where I'm from. So we're going to talk about what dominant culture in games means. And there's different ways to frame this. For today's discussion, I'm going to frame it as this: the structural power patterns that broadly organize companies and resources along lines of race, class, gender, sexuality, ability, and religion. And there are lots of different ways to frame this, and this is a whole talk in itself, but I'm going to talk about some dominant cultural traits in organizations, in games, in publishers, in development houses, things like that. So just going to cover some of them. The sense of urgency, the need for projects to just continue to be worked on to make progress. Power hoarding, the idea that power is finite and only few can have it. That's a dominant culture idea. Progress is bigger and more. A game has to be bigger, a game has to sell more, it has to make more revenue. And the idea of right to comfort. Right to comfort over the right for humanity. Being black at a Starbucks, for example, or shoveling snow, as just happened last month. The idea that comfort supersedes a minority's need to live and survive. So this is where we are in 2023. The idea of what's happening right now with certain books being banned and critical race theory trying to be erased from America's racist history. If we look at games specifically, we look at who is in positions of hiring and firing and greenlighting projects and funding, and it's predominantly white men, mostly white folks. And this is fine for a lot of folks, but it is changing over time. But people tend to invest in people that look like them or that they can relate to. And someone like me, when I'm pitching a project, I have to do a lot of extra work to try to convince someone to fund the project, or it's really less about the project as they're really wondering, do I believe this person that is pitching this thing? Do I believe they can do it? So that's a big concern. So 2017, I had been in the industry for about 20 years by then, and I wanted to, I had worked at different companies, at different positions, big and small companies, in art, design, game direction. A couple things happened that year, because I was been thinking about trying to go on my own as well, and this man came into power, and it wasn't really the best situation for immigrants that are in this country and folks that want to come to the country. And I was like, am I going to get deported? Is that a thing that could happen? I'm a U.S. citizen, but that was certainly a real thought that crossed my mind and my friends and family. Later that year, Hassan Minhaj did a stand-up special called Homecoming King, where he talked about growing up as a second-generation Indian in a small town in California, and sort of all the pressures and the generational trauma and dealing, dealing with stuff with his dad and his parents in post 9/11, what that was like. But it wasn't just the trauma. There was also joy and great stories and love and breakup. And it got me thinking, why aren't we seeing this more in games? We certainly see it in movies and TV shows, but why aren't we doing that in games? So which led me to start a company in later that year called Outer Loop Games. We focused games about underrepresented cultures and themes with gameplay that I think is trying to be more accessible and with some depth. So that was later in the year. Our first game that we spent a couple years after that came out in 2019. It was called Falcon Age. It's a game about a baby falcon, a cute baby falcon that you get to train and pet, but also takes place in a world that is influenced by British imperialism in South Asia. So it's a very anti-colonial game. So we're trying to mix this gameplay and this cute bird and also these heavy topics. And we were trying to build a studio fully remote and also trying to build this game. So we learned a lot. And really it led us to the next game, which is Thirsty Suitors. We're working on it now. It's been about 3 years. It'll be out later this year. It's a game about queer, black, and brown culture game about a woman returning to home in a small town in Washington State. Her name is Jala, the woman on the left. And she has had just a terrible time with all her relationships, broke up with all her 6 exes that you'll face in the course of the game. And then just haven't had the best relationship with her parents either. And that's some of her exes you'll face. And the way the game plays is how do we tackle idea of love and breakup and what one person's memory was versus others. The way we do that is through turn-based combat. They're not actually physically fighting, but it's the idea of these two people that had a relationship. They're having an argument, and we personify that through the surreal turn-based combat in their own inner world. And there's moods and a lot of conversation. The conversation is as important as the moves you do against your ex. And it's from a very specific point of view. It's from the specific point of view of the experience of the people on the team. Oh yeah, there's skateboarding and cooking. Cooking is used to build a relationship with your parents. And we do a lot of things in this game where there's things in the game where I would never say to my mom ever, but we let the player try to say that to Jala's parents in the game. So we really feel like the idea of focusing on a specific point of view can be universal, because we're dealing with love and breakup and generational pressure, immigrant trauma, and things like that. But for everyone else that's not in the culture, we are inviting you into our home. We're cooking a meal for you. Well, I mean, in this case, you're the one cooking the meal, but telling you stories and really giving you an idea of what it's like to be in this culture from an immigrant perspective. So one big thing we believe is that playfulness and seriousness are not opposites, that they can exist in the same space, and it really adds to the storytelling and complexity of it. This is our team currently. We're at 16 people. We started at about 3 or 4, and we grew to about 9 during Falcon Age. And we've been fully remote since 2017. We're spread across 4 continents and 7 cities. Great group of people. It's been really a joy for me to work with them. So one of the things we really strive for is intentionality. Like the reason we worked on, wanted to start remote was to be able to work with folks outside the US. And some of the ways to kind of fight this dominant culture traits are some of these elements that we're trying to do. Building a cultural appreciation, or having humility and being vulnerable. We all make a lot of mistakes. I've been in the industry a long time. I still make plenty of mistakes all the time, but just being able to have an environment where that is okay. And definitely about making mistakes, whether you're older or younger part of the group. And then really about having a space where constructive feedback can be used to make the game better, but it's really, really about the team. And then long-term thinking. For us, the team is more important than whatever project we're working on, because the idea is we want to try to keep the same team as long as they want to stay with us for multiple projects. So this is a thing that I've been thinking about a lot recently. In 2020, after George Floyd murder, there was a lot of push in games too, where folks were really trying to invest in Black and brown creators, and a lot of companies promised a lot of Black creator initiatives. And then there was a lot of big push to DEI and trying to bring in more diversity to a studio or to a publisher. And what we're seeing now is a lot of those folks are either leaving those positions or are getting laid off because they're brought in too late into the process. They don't really have a lot of say in the structure of a company. And that's really what it needs to happen. For minorities to thrive in your business or in your studio, you really need to think that from the start of the studio, and who's in power and who gets to make the decisions. So what are some ways that we can fight dominant culture ideals? I mean, even folks like me, we are swimming in the same pool, and we are also influenced by some of these dominant culture traits. So as I mentioned, something like constructive feedback and long-term inclusive thinking, acceptance of discomfort. We're uncomfortable all the time. That's okay. We can get through it. Urgent patience, being transparent about identity and values, and then progress is really about sustainability, not really short-term thinking. So I've been coming to GDCs for a long time, and this was a conversation I had a couple years ago. Someone walked up to me that I didn't know. They were like, "I really love your games." And I was, I'm always happy when someone at least understands what we're making or have played our games. I was like, "Thank you. That's really nice of you. Looking forward to your next game." "Awesome. That's really nice of you," I said. "Supergiant is my favorite studio." I was like, "Wait a minute. That's not me." Oh, I get it. You think I'm him. You think I'm Amir Rao, who is younger, more handsome, and a lot more talented than I am. So I get it. I want to be Amir too, but we're short and brown. Other than that, we're two different people. So it's like, don't assume, folks. It's really I'm not trying to be invisible, obviously. The reason I have red hair and loud clothes, I want you to not think I'm somebody else. So this happens so often over a number of years And it's not really one-time incident. I'm not alone in this. So my friend Mitu, we made shirts one year at GDC where, like, essentially, yeah, we're not these people, right? Like, we are all different people. We are individuals. We're not a monolith. And please don't try to guess our names. A month ago, I was at DICE. I got to do something really fun, which is Tim Schafer was getting a Lifetime Award. And he wanted to do a stage on like a fireside chat, and he asked me to host it. So it was just a one-on-one chat. It was like at 10:30 in the morning. I brought out some whiskey just to kind of lighten the mood, and we sat on stage and we chatted. Tim's great, big fan of his work. Full Throttle was one of his earlier games that got me really into making games, and so I was like really honored to do this. And it was really fun. And I didn't have to do anything. I just have to just kind of direct the conversation, and Tim did the rest. But 2 hours prior to this, as we're rehearsing, I was going backstage, and then they were introducing, as I was like with the stage crew, one of the folks came up to me, he's like, Pocky or Hindu? And I was like, what? That doesn't even make any sense. Like, those two things are not or. And then I was like, okay. And I was pissed, obviously, but I can't really say how I feel all the time, right? Like, it's just not going to go well. So I said neither. And they said, Tamil? And I'm like, no. And I said, this is why you shouldn't make assumptions. Like, there's no point in doing this, right? And we had never met before. Hey, I'm well-traveled, they said. Doesn't matter, there's no prize for guessing. Did he ask the other white folks around me the same question? No. I dropped it, but it was like, it kind of soured my whole week for that, even though I had a good time. So, I mean, games, 25 years now. I love this industry. These are little things that happen enough are annoying, and I'm not special. This happens to all other sort of minorities and folks that are not in the dominant culture. But I'm really hopeful that those things that make us different are the things that also make us unique and interesting, and those are kind of things I want like the people to lean on for their games and stories. And I really believe, like, through joy and hope and some of our unique stories, we can really have an interesting games and industry. Hold on, no, sorry. The clicker. So back to this question. Where are you from? Now that we're friends, I'll tell you. I grew up in Sri Lanka, lived in Maryland, lived in LA, Orange County, Seattle. I am all these things and none of these things. We are not a representative of one place. We're a collection of our experiences and the folks that we hang out with and love and grow with. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Chandana. I hope to see much more from you and anybody else who's operating in this space in the future. And thanks to all of our speakers today. Let's hear it. Let's have one more round of applause for everyone. Awesome. So I hope to see all of you for the Independent Games Festival and Game Developers' Choice Awards. Those ceremonies take place here on the main stage and will be streamed online tonight on Twitch and on the Swap Card app starting at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. A lot of great games will be there. Some industry legends are being awarded, at least in my humble opinion as a Doom fan. So it'll be a good time. Please come through. If you're here in San Francisco and do attend the awards, I also encourage you to donate any unused hygiene products to Compass Family Services. There's a donation box stationed outside the award entrance. And if you have an all-access or core conference badge, I encourage you to come check out the Experimental Game Workshop, which I am co-hosting on Friday at 1:30 p.m. We've had sort of like a soft reboot, and we're showing a lot of great games. I'm honestly really excited about it, because a lot of these games no one's seen before in any sort of presentation. So I think it'll be great. And finally, GDC will be hosting a virtual event this summer called GDC Showcase. So look out for details about the event around Moscone and on the GDC website. So now it's time to go forward for the rest of this week. Let's instill ourselves with the spirit of the future. Okay, one more round of applause, and everyone have a great rest of your week.
Magazine, then pretend I'm one of you. They move wild and carefree, as hip can be. I think I should split the way